I was asleep and woke up to find my grandson's 2 fingers inside me. It was a weekend and he had come over to visit. I didn't anticipate something so delightful happening unexpectedly. Let me share this story with you now, but before I do, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. The laughter resonated through the cozy living room, enveloping the group of family and friends in a warm, joyful atmosphere. I perched on the edge of the sofa, a wide grin spread across my face as I accepted congratulations for recently completing my college degree. My grandmother, Evelyn, was the cornerstone of the celebration. Her silvery hair shimmered under the lights as she bustled around, handing out drinks and slices of cake. Her laughter was melodious, yet beneath her cheerful demeanor, I sensed an underlying restlessness within her. "Jake, come here so I can take a picture of you with your diploma," Evelyn called out, her eyes sparkling with pride. I stood and moved toward her as the camera's flash briefly blinded me. As I leaned in for the photo, I caught sight of her expression. A wistful smile laced with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "Here's to the future," my grandfather Harold proclaimed loudly, raising his glass. He was the epitome of a commanding patriarch, his booming voice filling the room. Yet, the faint lines of fatigue on his face betrayed the toll of years spent in an unchanging routine. Looking between them, I noticed something in their eyes. A shared longing, a quiet yearning for more. It was a fleeting moment, but it was enough to make me realize that even amidst celebration and joy, there were silent wishes and unrealized dreams. Evelyn's typically radiant smile dimmed as she turned away from the camera, her gaze drifting toward the window. It was as though a switch had flipped, and the light in her eyes faded. The party carried on, lively with laughter and conversation, but I couldn't shake the sense that something was amiss. The air seemed heavier, burdened by words left unsaid. Evelyn appeared like a bird trapped in a golden cage, her cheerful smile a mere facade. Later, as the gathering began to dwindle, I found myself wandering outside. The garden was bathed in the soft hues of twilight, the scent of freshly mown grass and blooming flowers perfuming the air. It was serene, offering a welcome reprieve from the house's commotion. "Jake!" Evelyn's voice broke the stillness, her tone shifting from the buoyant hostess to something far more tender. "I thought I'd find you out here," she said as she stepped outside. "Just needed some fresh air," I replied, leaning against the wooden fence. "It's lovely out here," she agreed, stepping closer, her figure outlined against the fading sunlight. "You've accomplished so much. I'm really proud of you." "Thanks, Grandma," I said, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't quite understand. "How are you doing, really?" Her expression clouded for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "Oh, you know, life goes on," she said lightly, though the weight in her tone was unmistakable. "Sometimes I wonder if that's all there is." "What do you mean?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "Just the routine," she admitted in a near whisper. "Harold and I have been together so long, but sometimes it feels like we're just going through the motions." "I get that," I said softly, feeling an unspoken connection building between us. "I feel like I'm only starting to figure things out, and it's terrifying." Evelyn stepped closer, her breath catching slightly as her eyes met mine. "You have your whole life ahead of you, Jake. Don't let anyone hold you back." A soft laugh escaped me, breaking some of the tension that lingered between us. "You know," I began. "I remember those times at the park when Grandma Evelyn would push me on the swings. I felt like I could soar. Her eyes would twinkle with a mischievous glint, full of vitality and joy. Those were such happy days." Now, sitting here together in her garden, a calm silence fell between us, a quiet that carried a weight of unspoken emotions. It was as if we shared a secret language, a mutual understanding of the longing that hung in the air, as poignant and fleeting as the last light of the setting sun. I wanted to reach out, to close the emotional distance that seemed to stretch between us, but the moment was interrupted by Harold's voice calling from inside the house. "Evelyn, come in, we need to tidy up," he said, completely unaware of the unspoken connection we had shared in those brief moments. "I should go," she murmured, her tone laced with hesitation. "Yeah, of course," I responded, a wave of disappointment washing over me. "See you in a bit." As she turned to leave, I couldn't shake the sense that something between us had changed. A bond had formed in the stillness of the garden, a connection that was both thrilling and unsettling. I watched her walk away, the weight of our unspoken emotions pressing heavily on me. Harold emerged from the house, catching the end of our interaction, a moment that would set off a series of events neither of us could have predicted. Now, a week later, I found myself sitting in the living room. The afternoon sun streamed through the delicate curtains, casting a warm, golden glow across the room. My mind is consumed with thoughts of Jake, the weight of our unspoken emotions hanging heavily in the atmosphere. I gaze at the family pictures adorning the wall, filled with smiles and laughter, yet I feel strangely disconnected from that joy. My heart pounds with a blend of guilt and exhilaration as I recall the way Jake looked at me, his eyes reflecting a yearning that echoed my own. Why am I feeling like this? I murmur to myself, shaking my head in an attempt to clear the thoughts, but deep down I know the truth. The bond we formed in that garden is undeniable, the spark reigniting a flame I had long believed to be extinguished. My chest tightens at the thought of Harold, the man with whom I've built my life, but the thrill of the secret I share with Jake is utterly intoxicating. The cafe had always been our usual meeting spot, the inviting scent of coffee and pastries filling the air. I sat at our regular booth, nervously drumming my fingers on the wooden table as I waited for Jake. The bell above the door jingled, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw him step inside. He looked as dashing as ever, his hair slightly disheveled and that familiar smile lighting up his face. "Hey, Evelyn," he greeted, sliding into the seat across from me. His voice was soft, almost a murmur, as though speaking too loudly might break the fragile world we were attempting to navigate. "Hi, Jake," I responded, returning his smile even as my heart raced. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come." "I wouldn't miss it," he replied, his gaze locking onto mine. The intensity in his eyes was palpable, the weight of our shared secret pulling me closer to him. "I've been thinking about us," I began, my voice shaking slightly. Whatever it is, it's complicated." Jake nodded, his face growing serious. "I know it seems wrong, but I can't control how I feel about you," he said, leaning closer and lowering his voice. "I don't want to lose you, Evelyn." I swallowed hard, the weight of our situation hitting me like a crashing wave. "What if someone finds out? What about Harold?" I asked, his name feeling heavy as it left my lips, a reminder of the life I had built. "Harold doesn't have to know," Jake replied firmly. "We can keep this just between us. Let me be with you, even if it's only for a short time." The tension between us was almost tangible. I searched his face, hoping to find some reassurance, some answer to the conflict within me, but, deep down, I knew we were on the verge of breaking every rule. "Jake, this feels like a betrayal," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I know," he said, running a hand through his hair in frustration, "but what we have is real. I've never felt this way about anyone, and I can't just walk away from it." His words hung heavily in the air, brimming with meaning. A flood of emotions surged through me, fear, excitement, longing. "What if it's just a phase?" I asked, desperately clinging to a shred of logic. "What if we regret it later?" Jake reached across the table and took my hand in his. The warmth of his touch sent a jolt of electricity through me. "Evelyn, I don't care what anyone else thinks. I just want to be with you, don't you see that?" I looked down at our hands clasped together, my heart pounding as the conflict within me grew louder. "I do care, Jake," I said, my voice trembling. "I care about Harold. I don't want to hurt him." "You already are," Jake said softly, his eyes searching mine. "By denying this to yourself, denying us." His words struck me deeply, and I felt tears welling in the corners of my eyes. "I'm so confused," I murmured, barely able to get the words out. "Let's take it slow," Jake suggested. "We don't have to rush into anything. Just let me be near you." With that, he leaned in and placed a soft kiss on my cheek, igniting a fire within me that I couldn't ignore. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the moment, torn between passion and morality. As he pulled away, I knew a choice had to be made. I couldn't deny the connection we shared any longer, but the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. "I suppose we can keep this secret for now," I said finally, my voice shaking. "But we have to be careful, Jake. I can't let this hurt anyone else." His smile was radiant, though I could see the hesitation in his eyes. "I promise. I'll do everything I can to protect us," he said. As I left the cafe, my emotions were in turmoil. I had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The thrill of our bond was intoxicating, yet the weight of what I'd done pressed heavily on me. I was stepping into the unknown, unsure of just how deep this rabbit hole might go. The air was thick with tension as I sat across from Harold at the dinner table. He was recounting his day, but his words barely registered. My thoughts were consumed with Jake, his laughter echoing in my mind, and the way he looked at me, as though I were the only person in the world that mattered. I glanced at Harold, who remained oblivious to the storm churning inside me. "Evelyn, are you even listening?" Harold asked, his brow furrowed as he set his fork down. I blinked, snapped out of my thoughts. "Oh, sorry, dear," I replied, scrambling for an excuse. "I was just thinking about what I've been working on in the garden. You know how it is." I forced a smile, though it felt like a mask more than a genuine expression. He nodded, but the flicker of doubt in his eyes was unmistakable. I hated that I was making him uneasy, but I couldn't stop myself. The feelings I had for Jake were overpowering, and the secrecy surrounding our relationship clung to me like a heavy shroud. As the days passed, my heart raced at the thought of our next meeting. The cabin, a secluded, hidden place, was perfect for losing ourselves in each other's arms, far from prying eyes. I could barely concentrate on anything else, eagerly awaiting the moment I'd see him again. When the weekend finally arrived, I drove toward the cabin, my stomach fluttering with anticipation. The trees zipped past, their vibrant hues blending into a blur of green and gold. After parking the car, I paused to inhale the crisp air before stepping inside. Jake was already there, leaning casually against the wooden railing with a playful smile lighting up his face. "You made it," he said warmly, his voice filled with affection. I hurried into his arms, feeling the weight of the world slip away as he held me tightly. "I couldn't wait to see you," I whispered, pulling back to meet his gaze. "I've missed you," he replied, gently brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered, sending a shiver down my spine. The cabin was quaint and rustic, filled with the earthy scent of pine and the sound of wind rustling through the trees. We settled into the cozy living room, the crackling fire casting dancing shadows across the walls. "Let's make the most of our time," Jake suggested, his eyes glinting with mischief. "What do you want to do first?" A surge of excitement ran through me. "How about some wine? It'll help us relax," I suggested. He nodded, pouring us each a generous glass. As we clinked glasses, the sound resonated like a secret pact. "To us," he said, his words carrying a weight that settled between us. As we sipped the wine, our conversation flowed effortlessly, punctuated by bursts of laughter, though an underlying tension reminded me of the risks we faced. "Evelyn," Jake began, his tone shifting to something more serious. "What if someone finds out about us? What happens then?" I exhaled slowly, the gravity of his question heavy in the air. "I don't know, Jake," I admitted, my voice barely audible. "I wish I could just be with you without all this fear, but we need to be careful." He leaned in, his gaze intense. "I don't want to hide any more. I want a future with you." My heart pounded at his words, but guilt clawed at me. "It's not that simple, Jake. Harold deserves better. We can't just throw everything away." "But what about what we feel?" he pressed, his voice filled with urgency. "Doesn't that matter?" I closed my eyes, caught between longing and responsibility. The storm outside mirrored the chaos within me as thunder rumbled and the wind howled, charging the air with electricity. "Jake," I started, but my words were cut short as the lights flickered and went out. Darkness enveloped us, with only the roaring fire casting its warm glow. Jake's hand found mine, a steadying presence amidst the chaos. "Looks like we're stuck here," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice despite the situation. I let out a nervous chuckle, feeling the tension between us crackle like the storm outside. "Stuck, yes," I said, "but I suppose we can make the best of it." He leaned in, his face mere inches from mine. I want to make this worth it, Evelyn. I need you to know how I feel. The storm raged on, but in that moment, everything else disappeared. It was just the two of us, enveloped in a bubble of desire and longing, with the world outside forgotten. I surrendered to the pull of his lips, the taste of wine, and his warm breath surrounding us as we kissed. The weight of reality lifted, if only for a moment. Yet, in the back of my mind, a whisper lingered, a reminder of the storm brewing not only outside, but within our hearts. As I stepped through the front door later, my chest tightened with the weight of Harold's inevitable discovery. My heart raced at the edge of exposure, and my hands trembled as I fumbled for my phone, desperately hoping for a message from Jake. The thrill of our connection still lingered in my mind, but the reality of my life bore down on me like an anchor. The familiar aroma of Harold's cooking greeted me as I entered the kitchen. He stood at the stove, stirring a pot of something hearty, his back turned to me. I noticed the tension in his posture, the way his shoulders stiffened with each movement. Taking a deep breath, I braced myself for the conversation I knew was coming. "Evelyn," Harold said, his voice low and gravelly, "can we talk?" I hesitated, uncertain how to respond. His tone carried an unspoken accusation, a doubt that had crept into our lives like an unwelcome guest. "Sure, Harold, what's on your mind?" I asked cautiously. He turned to face me, his expression a mix of concern and suspicion. "I found some messages on your phone, from Jake." My stomach dropped. "Jake?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "Don't lie to me, Evelyn. I want the truth. Who is he to you?" His eyes bore into mine, demanding honesty, but all I could think about was the love that had grown between Jake and me, a love that felt both right and wrong. "Jake is just a friend," I lied, my voice shaky. "He's been helping me with a few things around the house." Harold scoffed. "Helping you? Is that what you're calling it?" he said, stepping closer. "I know there's more to it. I can feel it." His expression softened slightly, the anger giving way to hurt. "Please, just tell me what's going on." I felt trapped, the walls closing in around me. "Harold, I swear, it's nothing. You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" he repeated, running a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. "I find messages that sound like something out of a romance novel, and you think I'm overreacting? I just want to understand." "Understand what?" I snapped, surprising even myself with the sharpness of my tone. "That I'm feeling alive again? You've been so wrapped up in your own world you didn't notice I was fading away." "Fading away?" he echoed, confusion and sadness clouding his face. "I thought we were happy, Evelyn. I thought you were content." "I'm not," I said, tears brimming in my eyes. "I haven't been happy in years. I've felt trapped. And Jake, he makes me feel alive. He listens to me, cares for me, in a way you haven't in so long." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could see the realization dawn on Harold, the pain twisting his features. "So, it's true then," he said quietly. "You have feelings for him." I nodded, unable to find the words to convey the storm of emotions swirling within me. "I didn't plan for this. It just happened." "Just happened?" he repeated bitterly. "Do you even understand the risks, what this could do to our family? To me?" "I know," I shouted, my voice cracking under the weight of my guilt. "But I can't ignore how I feel. I know it's wrong, but I can't help it." Harold's expression softened as the fight drained from his body. "So, what now?" he asked, his voice quieter but heavy with pain. "Are you choosing him over the life we built together?" "I don't know," I admitted, my heart aching. "I don't know what to do." Harold turned away, his shoulders trembling slightly as he struggled to regain composure. I need time," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "Time to think." As he walked away, I whispered, "I can't believe this is happening," the words escaping me like a breath. I sank into a chair, my mind racing with thoughts of Jake. My phone buzzed, and I grabbed it, my pulse quickening when I saw his name. The message read, "Evelyn, I miss you. Can we meet tonight?" I hesitated, the weight of my choice pressing heavily in my hands, yet deep down, I knew I couldn't stay away. My fingers moved quickly over the screen as I typed, "Yes, I'll be there." The thrill of our clandestine meeting sent shivers down my spine. I was drawn to Jake like a moth to a flame, even as I knew every moment we spent together widened the rift between me and Harold. But the thought of Jake's arms around me, his laughter filling the air, offered a glimmer of light in the chaos of my life. As I prepared to leave, I caught sight of my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at me seemed lost, torn between two worlds. Yet, there was also a spark of defiance in her eyes. I was ready to face the unknown, to fight for the love that reignited a spark I thought had been extinguished long ago. Stepping out into the cool night air, my heart raced with the thrill of what lay ahead. I was determined to embrace the possibilities, even as I felt the storm was only just beginning. The atmosphere in the house was tense, the silence oppressive as I paced the living room. My heart pounded in my chest. Harold had been gone for hours, and the quiet was suffocating. The weight of the investigator's report loomed over me, pressing heavily on my conscience. I glanced at my phone, hoping for a message from Jake, but there was nothing, only the echo of my own thoughts. When Harold finally returned, his expression was a storm of anger and heartbreak. A chill ran through me as he entered the room, clutching a crumpled piece of paper like a weapon. "Evelyn," he said, his voice dangerously low, "we need to talk." I swallowed hard, trying to maintain an air of calm. "What is it, Harold?" He threw the report onto the coffee table, and it slid across the surface, stopping at my feet. "This," he said, his voice rising, "this is what it is." The pain etched into his features was impossible to ignore. "You thought I wouldn't find out? You thought I wouldn't notice the late nights and the secretive phone calls?" I picked up the report, the words on the page cutting through me like blades. "Harold, Don't you dare defend yourself," he interrupted, his eyes blazing. "You've been meeting him, my own grandson. How could you do this to our family?" My resolve began to crumble. "It's not what you think. I didn't plan for this to happen." "Then what is it? A mistake? A fling?" he demanded, stepping closer. His voice shook with emotion. "You're in love with him, aren't you?" Tears stung my eyes as I struggled to contain the storm inside me. "It's not a fantasy. This is real to me. We have a connection I can't explain." Harold's face twisted in disbelief. "And what about us? What about the life we've built, the vows we made?" His words struck me like a blow, and I stepped back, feeling suddenly small. "I never meant for it to go this far, Harold," I pleaded, my voice breaking. "I can't just turn off my feelings." "Then I'll handle this myself," he said, his voice eerily calm. "I'll tell the whole family. I'll make sure everyone knows what you've done. Maybe that will force you to stop this madness." Panic surged through me. "Harold, please don't," I begged, desperation creeping into my voice. "You can't expose this. It'll destroy everything." "You should have thought of that before you started this affair," he shouted, his frustration boiling over. "Do you think I want this? Do you think I want to tear our family apart? You've left me no choice." In that moment, I felt the walls closing in, the weight of my guilt and shame threatening to crush me. "Harold, I never wanted to hurt you," I whispered. I just wanted to feel alive again." He scoffed. "You're playing with fire, Evelyn, and you're going to get burned." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the table. I grabbed it, my heart racing when I saw Jake's name. "Meet me now," the message read, urgency pouring from every word. I looked up at Harold, my heart torn in two. I have to go," I stammered, my thoughts spinning. "Where do you think you're going?" Harold demanded, fury etched across his face. "I can't explain," I mumbled, backing toward the door. "I just need to see him." "Evelyn!" he shouted, but I was already slipping into the night. The cool air rushed over me as I stepped outside. Each step felt like a leap into the unknown, away from the life I had known, and toward the dangerous allure of Jake's love. As I drove toward the cabin, the weight of my choices pressed down on me, but I couldn't turn back. I had to see Jake. I had to know if what we shared was truly love or just a reckless game. The cabin was dimly lit, the scent of pine filling the air. Jake stood by the window, his silhouette framed by the fading light. My heart raced as he turned to face me, his expression a mix of relief and raw desire. "Ah, Evelyn," he breathed, closing the space between us in an instant. "Jake," I whispered, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and exhilaration. He pulled me into his arms, his warmth enveloping me as I rested my head against his chest. The steady rhythm of his heartbeat mirrored the chaos within me. "I've missed you," he murmured, drawing back just enough to meet my gaze. "I've been thinking about our future," he added, his voice low and filled with longing. "Shh," I interrupted, pressing a finger to his lips. "We can't talk about this now, not here." The weight of reality bore down on me, yet the excitement of being with him made it almost impossible to resist. The fantasy of running away from it all. Jake sighed, his gaze smoldering with intensity. "But we need to, Evelyn. I can't stand the idea of going back to that life." His words sent a chill down my spine, both tempting and terrifying. "Where would we go?" I asked, my mind spinning with the absurdity and chaos of it all. "Forget about Harold," Jake said firmly, stepping closer and gripping my arms. "This is about us. We can leave everything behind and start over. I just want to be with you." I wanted to believe him. My heart ached for the escape he offered, but the voice of reason gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. "Jake, it's not that simple. We have families, obligations." "Evelyn," he cut me off, his tone shifting to something more solemn. "There's something you need to know. Something important." A knot formed in my stomach. "What is it?" I asked, my voice shaky. He hesitated, his eyes falling to the floor before locking onto mine, filled with a mix of fear and determination. "I'm not just your grandson," he began, his words slow and deliberate. "I'm also the result of an affair. Your affair." His statement hit me like a lightning strike. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. "What are you saying?" I whispered. "Your affair," he repeated, his voice steady but pained. "With the man you loved before Harold, that's who I am, Evelyn. I'm your blood." The room seemed to tilt around me. "No, that's not true," I gasped. Memories I had long buried clawing their way to the surface. The summer of stolen moments, the secret meetings, the child I thought I had lost to time and circumstance. "You're lying," I managed, my voice barely audible. "I wish I were," he replied, his face contorted with anguish. "But I found the records. I know who my father is." My breath caught as his revelation sunk in, shattering the fragile world I had built. You can't be serious. This is madness." Before he could respond, a loud knock broke through the tense silence, making us both freeze. "Evelyn, are you in there?" Harold's voice thundered through the cabin, filled with authority and anger. Panic surged through me. "Jake, we need to hide," I whispered frantically. "No," he said firmly, shaking his head as determination replaced his fear. "We need to face this. The truth has to come out." I wanted to scream at him to stop, to take his hand and run, but Harold's voice grew louder, more forceful. "I know you're in there. Open the door." My hands trembled as I reached for the handle, but Jake grabbed my wrist. "Evelyn, don't let him control you anymore," he pleaded. "Open the door, Evelyn!" Harold shouted again, his voice commanding and unyielding. My heart thundered in my chest. "Okay," I whispered, pulling my hand away from Jake's grasp. "I'll talk to him." "Evelyn," Jake said desperately, his eyes searching mine. "Please." I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage I had, and opened the door. Harold stood there, his face pale and furious, his eyes darting between Jake and me. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, stepping inside. His hand clutched a family photo so tightly that the edges crumpled. "Harold, wait," I began, but he silenced me with a sharp gesture, shoving the picture toward me. "This," he said, his voice trembling with rage, "this changes everything." My heart sank as I recognized the photo. "Harold, please," I started, but he cut me off again. "Look at it," he growled. I glanced at the picture, and the weight of the truth crushed me, A wave of understanding washed over me, and the enormity of what we had done became inescapable. "What have we done?" I whispered, my voice breaking under the strain of realization. In that moment, with the consequences of our choices looming heavily over us, I knew nothing would ever be the same. The darkness of our secrets had consumed us, and there was no way to turn back.